Hello everyone and welcome to week 4 of our PowerPoint presentations. This week we're going to take a look at two organizations, one public and one private, both with the same mission with regards to protecting environmental issues and concerns. So one is the Environmental Protection Agency and the other one is CH2M Hill, which is a top-ranked environmental contract engineering firm actually in the world. So let's go ahead and take a look at these organizations a little bit closer. The Environmental Protection Agency was established under the Nixon administration. It's a governmental regulatory agency which enforces all of the laws that get passed in regards to environmental health and public health. So that includes Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and hazardous waste materials. So the CH2M Hill is a private organization. They also are basically in line with that same environmental health and public health mission because they work with local communities to help create sustainable initiatives for natural resources. And they do so by employing some of the top-ranked biologists, geologists, and engineers in order to do that. So when we look at these two organizations, we're really trying to answer the question that Graham Allison had proposed in, are public and private organizations fundamentally alike? And even the little nuances, he said in all, unimportant aspects, so to speak. So my thesis for this PowerPoint is that when we compare the two, these two organizations in which one is public and one is private, the missions and goals between the two are all aligned. They're both into environmental protection, but even though that these mission and goals are the same, the fundamental differences in the actual creation of the organization from the get-go, which includes the structure of the organization, the bureaucracy of the institution, and the management of these resources. Even though there's some fundamental similarities, unfortunately they create an unequal level of efficiency due to the fundamental differences as well. So it's going to favor the private company over the public organization in the end, due to all of these differences. And private companies are just able to run a little bit leaner and a little bit more efficient because they don't have to deal with some of these hassles, so to speak, and we'll explain a little bit more about that. So the three theories we're going to talk about, or I guess you could say the three themes, and then the theorists that go along with it have to do with management and the coordination of resources. Another theme that we'll see is the efficiency of these organizations and consistency, and then the bureaucracy and actually creating bureaus, and kind of look at both of these organizations, how they're similar and different. So with management and coordination of resources, you have prominent theorists Gulick and Ulrich, who created that POSDECORP acronym when they did their science papers of science of the public administration. And basically, as far as similarities go, both the EPA and CH2M Hill really do have same different departments when it comes to the different needs of the organization. So you have, an HR department, you have, an accounting department, you have, your different staffing needs, you have your organizational needs, planning needs. So these fundamental similarities really align the two, and that is one of the similarities between the two. But unfortunately, when you go into the specifics then of them and actually the management of them and then the structure of the hierarchy based around that management, they're completely different. So the EPA really has more of a strict hierarchy, and then the CH2M Hill really doesn't. And so they may have certain areas in which they do have to run it to their supervisor, but it's a lot less structured, and it's definitely more of a goal-oriented society and social culture than the strict hierarchy of the EPA that has to run everything up the flagpole, which reduces, processing time. So in light of that, we kind of talk about the efficiency and then consistency. So Taylor and his scientific management really comes into play here. And as he had mentioned, when we try to make it so that we have specific people in certain areas, and they're cogs on a wheel, so to speak, those people are very replaceable. For the EPA and a lot of public organizations, they rely on part-time management. And they just have these, necessarily unskilled workers, but they are definitely replaceable, and they have a set skill level that is in order to fit a larger goal, but that goal is for the greater need of the organization and is not necessarily for the fulfillment of the employee. Whereas in private organizations, you have highly skilled professionals that are very goal oriented. They have a closer knit community within themselves. They have better personal bonds, and they really do, work in order for that personal fulfillment. And the organization gives back to them in that personal fulfillment as well, because it aligns their personal missions and goals with the organization's. For bureaucracy, so the EPA really has a strict hierarchy that we had mentioned, and because of that, the consistency and accountability, as Weber talked about, is really seen in clarity because it's one of the biggest organizations in terms of public, environmental protection. So you have the same processes, you have the same forms, you have a lot of that red tape, and that reduces the efficiency of the organization. You have that same consistent process, but it's not necessarily the most efficient. And so in that case, when Weber talks about bureaucracy, that the EPA is a perfect example of a classic bureaucracy in which, efficiency tends to fail, though, because of these, divisions of labor and these, processes that drag the efficiency out, though, unfortunately. And then, unfortunately, though, you have a company like CH2M Hill that can surpass EPA in a standard because they are basing it on something kind of different, which Mary Parker Follett talks about reciprocal relationships. And so looking at bureaucracy in a different way, in which the private organization may have a type of hierarchy, but they're really for the common good. And so looking at how, even working with, governments and working with these different projects, with these different communities, it's really trying to customize that experience and not being so strict to the rules and the regulations, but really creating like a sense of community within the organization itself, as well as with the different partnerships that they're working with in the community. So we're going to end the slideshow on this cute little quote here. This one kind of just talks, in my opinion, about how a company is able to be agile or not. And that's kind of fitting for this slideshow because as we've kind of talked about, a public agency is unfortunately a bit more bureaucratic, excuse me. So one thing we didn't mention before is Downs, and when talking about the creation of a bureaucracy. So let's go back to that slide real quick as well. And so when we talk about, bureaucracy and creating bureaus, we basically have to talk about Downs and how he said that, an ideal situation is which, you have these zealots, you have these people with passion and with ideas, and they create an organization around it, and the organization is able to grow and bloom, and that's what happened with CH2M Hill. And so because it was able to, if it couldn't fly, it started to walk. If it couldn't run, then it started to, walk, or, vice versa, whatever the saying is I hear by Martin Luther King Jr. But it's just really going to the agility of the organization. So, and that's the core fundamental difference between, public and private organizations in itself. So I hope you enjoyed this PowerPoint presentation, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.